Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the old master bather. We're doing the pre-tech edition. Dodo's, come on, over here. We're doing the pre-tech edition here of the bathtub. No pixels, no tech, no fancy whiteboard. Just an old master bather and his parakeet reading books in the bathtub. And that's all we do here. And Dodo, you're really loud. Here, why don't you go back up into your toys? There you go. And we're reading through Cormac McCarthy. This is our challenge to ourselves and to a few of you, you stalwart types out there, which is I decided a few weeks ago to read through McCarthy's work from beginning to end, to more recent, his last novel, in order to read his new novels that are coming out soon. Dodo is so loud. And so what I'm up to is Suttree, or Suttree. I don't know how to pronounce it. We don't pronounce things well at the bathtub. We have no control over our pets, and we just doing nothing. And I'm drinking pure mountain water because we're doing the pure mountain water edition of the bathtub, the way Grandma used to YouTube. This is how Grandma used to YouTube. And let me tell you, that old lady knew how to YouTube when I knew her. Okay, Dodo, shut up. Suttree. I read this. Dodo, I'm going to put you in the cage. Come on. Let's see if we can do this. Show everybody at home how we control, what great control I have over my pets. Come on. Okay. And you can stay up here. Aha, sucker. There you go. You just got your first lesson on how to put the parakeet back into the cage. Oh my gosh. This show is getting worse and worse. Picking up some bird poo. And the latest trick, I used to be able to fool her with a mirror. But now if I make a lot of noise right next to my face, my big moon face, she's so distracted that I can sneak her in there. Okay. Where do you get this? Where are you going to get this kind of entertainment anywhere in booktubing? Suttree. This was published in originally 1979. I was just a gleam in my mother's eye back then. I wasn't. But I read all of McCarthy's books about 20 or 30 years ago when I reviewed his Border trilogy, and I reviewed those in London. And I went back and reread all his work, and I enjoyed all of his work. I am enjoying it more this time, and I read Suttree 30 years ago, and I couldn't remember it. I remember it as kind of a slower of his books and less interesting of his books. And when I started this, read through McCarthy's novels, I got a lot of replies from our bathing buddies out there who are saying things like they really loved Suttree. That was one of their favorite novels, and I was a little surprised. And so I went back to read it again. I thought it was going to be. It's like his longest novel, and it's about an old guy a young guy in his 20s. I think Suttree's in his 20s. They all call him Buddy. I forget his first name now. But he's a young guy who's obviously unhappy, and he has serious drinking problems when he drinks. He's always saying he doesn't want to have a drink, and then when he does have a drink, he just goes completely over the bend. And he's living somewhere in Knoxville, in Tennessee, off this boat, fishing and catching catfish and taking them into the market to sell, and basically living by the skin of his teeth every day and hanging out with all these different characters. There's an old black guy who runs a bar. And there's a whole cast of strange characters, and all I can say is that from the moment I started rereading Suttree, I loved it. I loved it the second time through. It's possibly my favorite of McCarthy's novels now. It's very different from the previous books. It is not the Hieronymus Boschian horror show of Outer Dark or Blood Meridian. It has its horror show elements. There's always in every McCarthy book, there's these images of just, you'll come across in this book. There's one scene where Suttree comes across this body in his home, and it's just rotting through with maggots. It's just been lying in there for weeks and weeks, and it's just rotting. And that sense that there's this death in our lives, that we are part of this eventual death, that we're going to be, that we're part of this kind of natural world, which is pretty horrifying in many ways. It's usually done it's very funny, but for the most part, it's about this guy just trying to get by and a series of adventures. It's kind of a series of stories that occur. For example, he goes into prison at one time and he meets a guy. Oh, what's that guy's name? Harrogate. There's one of the characters, the most memorable character is a guy named Harrogate, who's this 18, 20-year-old kid who's just a total loser. He always thinks he knows what he's going to do. He's a hilarious character. And he always thinks he's going to get away with something. And the first scene with him is he's going around some farmer's field cutting holes in pumpkins and having sex with the pumpkins. So don't tell Graham about this part of the kids. But he gets thrown in jail and he meets Suttree there. And he's always saying things like, "I know what I'm doing. I know how to get out of here." At one point, he says, "I know how to sneak out, and I always know exactly what I'm going to do." And of course, 5 minutes later, the guards beat the crap out of him, drag him back in. Every time Harrogate says he's got it, he's figured out how to make a bundle, you know he's going to come in on a board. They're really funny. They're very funny scenes. There's one scene in the prison where Harrogate. Someone gets him to remember when you were a kid, you try to make a ring out of a quarter? You get a spoon and a quarter. They're so bored. He's hitting this and tick, 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 tick. And he starts to drive this real big bully, crazy, psychotic prisoner crazy. The guy says, "Stop that damn ticking." And Harrogate goes, "He's doing it." And this guy there's a huge violent scene. It is almost like a Blood Meridian scene where there's all this violence is going on and everyone gets beat the crap out of except Harrogate. At the end of the scene, he picks up the quarter and he starts tapping it. And that's when I think Suttree says to him, "You better stop that damn noise." He puts it down. Anyway, I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. I laugh at that thing, but the whole thing is filled with it. There's one scene when every scene is, but every little adventure is about 15, 20, 30 pages. Beautifully written, very dramatic, very narrative. There's one part where Suttree's son dies. You never go inside of Cormac McCarthy's characters. You never really know what they're feeling or thinking. But, his son dies, and you can tell he's been estranged from his wife and his son. And he goes back home to be there at the funeral. And from the moment he gets home, it is just a nightmare. I mean, he's drunk. He starts assaulting people. It's hilarious and funny at the same time. The father, I think the stepfather, his father-in-law comes out with a shotgun at one point. His mother's crying. It's hilarious and horrifying at the same time. And then I think there's a scene where he just goes off and like that horrible monster in Child of God, he just sits down and starts crying. They're emotional, they're funny, they're strange. It actually has 2 or 3 kind of almost love stories in it between Suttree and this young girl he gets involved with, and then with this prostitute who comes into Knoxville to get away from the police. And it's very naturalistic. It reminds me a lot of the great naturalistic writers, the best of Dries or the best of Jack London, but with this incredibly beautiful prose. I think every page of it is wonderful. This is easily my favorite Cormac McCarthy now, and I'm really I agree with all you people who've been telling me what a great writer he is. I did have a passage. Okay, I'm going to read a short passage. There's one passage where up into the first 100 pages or so, people offer him drinks and he doesn't have it. And then you realize that when he does have it, he just completely loses it. And I'm going to cut past some of the bad swearing because then I can't tick the right boxes on this. But this is when he's gotten so drunk, they're starting pulling him out of this old bar. His feet, he's being dragged out of the bar, basically. His feet went banging down some stairs. He closed his eyes. They went through cinders and dirt, his heels gathering small windrows of trash. A dim world receded above his upturned toes. Shapes of skewed shacks erupted bluely in the niggard lamplight. The rusting carcass of an automobile passed slowly on his right. Dim scenes pooling in the summer night, wan inkwash of junks tilting against a paper sky, Rorschach boatmen poling mutely over a moon-cobbled sea. There's some really beautiful, kind of almost mystical, almost otherworldly scenes. He lay with his head on the moldy upholstery of an old car seat among packing crates and broken shoes and sun-crazed rubber toys in the dark. Something warm was running on his chest. He put up a hand. "I am bleeding," unto my death. A warm splatter broke across his face, his chest. He twisted his head away, moving one hand. He was wet, and he stank. He opened his eyes. A black hand was putting away a limber hosepipe, buttoning, turning. An enormous figure toppled away down the sky toward the mauve and glaucous dawn of the street lamps. Again, just a random passage, but again, you're in his head, and as the water, some guy's hosing him down. You're only seeing what he's experiencing. The whole book is just beautifully, beautifully put together, page after page. I all the way up to the end, which makes perfect sense. It's really about this man's life and his life in this place that he loves, and it's beautifully, beautifully described, and it's basically almost like the ends of the earth. And I recommend it very strongly, even if you don't like McCarthy, if you don't like some of the kind of more violent thrillers and the really, really dark stuff. This has a real beauty to it, and it has the beauty of again, it reminds me a little bit of Steinbeck, a little bit of Steinbeck. Extraordinary piece of writing, beautiful prose, beautiful novel. I think it almost, in many ways, I've always admired McCarthy, but I think now I admire him even more, having read Suttree. Okay, take care. Happy bathing.